Hey guys, this will be video 4 for the how to design build a custom guitar using Stuart McDonald templates and with an emphasis on the 58 Explorer replica. I need to always say replica. Anyway, let me knock this body out. We got a ton of ground to cover because we got some neck work to talk about. I bridled myself so that I could really show you guys how to build the neck. So if you're here for the neck, stick around because we'll spend about probably 30 to 45 minutes just talking about that. I'm going to finish it in real time and actually start fitting it to this body. So there's the body. That's what a authentic 58 would look like. With obviously that's the 19th fret location, and there's all the that's the remnant of the mahogany, which was epoxied in. No sense in talking about that. And then that is a tapered floor for the tenon, which I don't know if I haven't tried to fit this one. It may not fit, and it may be loose. Wow, how about that? That's pretty cool. So anyway, it's going to be something like that right there, and I'm not kidding you. I have not tried that yet. So I hit my tenon right on, because see, that's going to be well, it is what it is. It's radiused on the corners and it's radiused back there. That's a 1/2 inch. No, might be a 3/4 inch. I don't know. Whatever. It's not a 1/4 inch. It's a pretty large. I think it is a 1/2 inch. But nonetheless, after it's all said and done, it'd be extremely precise fit back in there. And then if you were actually installing this neck on here, the way you would do it, you would just shorten that tenon and start taking material off right here in order for it to start dropping down. Because, and I'm not kidding, this is actually an awesome sample to use as long as I don't drop this thing, because these are really hard to hold on to. See, I don't know if I'll be able to show the taper. Anyway, we all know that it pitches 2 degrees, okay? And as it comes further up into that pickup cavity, you see how it starts projecting further out of the body. So obviously you would be taking about 1/4 inch off this one in order to get it to fit. Let me get that off. Stop wasting time. But it turned out great. It was a one-shot pass. And the cool thing about that one is I think I used the Stuart McDonald Les Paul template for that. I'm pretty certain I did. And I just laid it on the center line. Let me get this cough drop out of my mouth. I just laid it on the center line and fastened it with some temporary, basically like a double-sided tape. Okay. And it was easy. It took probably 15, 20 minutes to route that out. And then after I got it routed out, then I have a jig that I set on there, and then I route the bottom for the actual taper. Okay, it's 2 degrees. Got the studs in, the anchors in. I would talk about this a little bit, but this is the second time I've done this video because I ended up a little while ago spending like 10 minutes talking about pressing these anchors in, and I can't spend that much time. So basically, the short is don't hammer your anchors in, and don't go with the pot metal. This is pot metal, and I only showed it in case I forget to show you the fact that that's a magnet, and it is basically non-magnetic. That's really cheap. And for like $15, you can get really nice little copies from Mighty Mite. That's actual steel. That's not just the stud. See, here I go again, spending too much time with this. But you can see that that's a quality anchor and a quality stud, even though it's a $15 copy. Okay. But nonetheless, I pressed these in with the C-clamp, obviously with protection on the back of the guitar. The studs were not in it. I was pressing the anchor in. And I've got these positions, so I'm going to back out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, so you saw how easy it was to get those to move. If you had have hammered those in, you might have run the risk of damaging that really fine thread in the anchor. Obviously, I'm not talking about the stud because the stud better be laying on the table. And I'm talking about getting the anchor in. Was it 14? 14, because I'm about to show you what it looks like with the Floyd Rose on there, and I've already leveled it. It's pretty close. Pretty cool. So get that off the table. This is an authentic, made in Germany Floyd Rose steel saddles. That's going to be brass right there, but everything about this is really high quality. And I'm not going to spend much time with this, but that'll show you. And also, what I'm showing here, the center between the two saddles in the middle, if they don't align with the center line that you have on the body, at a minimum, find out what is going on. Don't panic. Don't start beating these anchors out, because if this Floyd Rose was off to one side just a little, maybe 1 millimeter or something like that, it's not the end of the world. We can manipulate the neck down here to hide a multitude of sins. We don't want to do that type stuff, but don't panic or don't freak out and table your project if you screw these up. That's really difficult to get that really precise. So it is very important that you have the center to center correct, so that they're truly bottoming out once the Floyd Rose is in place. But if it gets off to one side just a little bit, again, like maybe a millimeter or something, then we can manipulate this stuff down here if we have to. Okay, and I'm even talking about moving the whole neck. I'm exaggerating, but I'm talking about moving the whole neck 1/2 millimeter, either low or 1/2 millimeter high, and no one would ever know that was off a little bit. That's worst case scenario. So let's see what it would look like with a late 80s, early 90s. I got a fairly good deal on this. This is my personal Floyd Rose, and it actually has the fat brass block, and that was the whole idea of the design. Most guys will look at that and go, "Wow, man, why did you cut so much out?" Well, in order to accommodate a super fat brass block, if you wanted to put that in there. That other one does not have it on there, but if it ever got upgraded to that, then you got plenty of room that you would never have any clearance issues. That's what she looked like with a black Floyd Rose. Pretty cool. All right. So the body. Should I talk about the body anymore? I don't think so. And probably what I'm going to do is just pause and get the body and most of the stuff off the table, and then we're going to start talking about router bits and how to cut a tenon and all that jazz. Let me check the time. 8 minutes. Yeah, about 8 to 10 minutes is plenty of time to talk about the body here. So very happy with that. No sense in talking about thicknesses or any of that stuff. That's kind of your own call. But don't ever go below 3/8 to 1/4 of an inch. You'd start getting too thin right in here. Okay, let me pause and we'll go from there. Okay, in video 3, I left off with the neck pretty much with very little work having been done. So we'll just do a little bit of a flyby here to let you take it all in. We've already discussed how this goes together, so you see exactly how it got turned, how it worked, or how it went, I should say. Anyway, very happy with it, and I have got this within about probably almost maybe a little bit more than a millimeter. No, I may be closer than that. This is okay. Here's the numbers. Sorry to lose myself. It's going to end up being about 17 millimeter right here. And let me make sure I don't make assumptions. I think it's 20. 20 and, yeah, it's almost 20. It's about 20.5 millimeter at the 11th fret. 17 millimeter, and I'm spot on 17 millimeter. I'm a little bit over 17 millimeter at the 1st fret. What is that? That's a great playing guitar. That's what that is. And it's basically a Gibson taper, about 1/8 of an inch. And I know sometimes I'll be talking in metric. and sometimes SAE, but I can't help it because sometimes it's easier for me to just work in metric because it's easier to find 1/2 of 43 than it is 1/2 of 1 11/16. And I think you all catch my drift there. So, what was the order of operations? Everything is left square, as already covered. None of this had been done. This was the very last thing that I did on the table saw. When I did every bit of this work up here, but I did not finish it. Meaning like round over the edges or anything like that. In case I bumped it, it's not that big of a deal. Especially a word of caution: if this was going to be a stain grade guitar, I would say do all of this work first. Possibly even go ahead and route your radius work here, like taper the neck and do all this work, and then do all of your final headstock work last. Because the last thing you want to do is do all this beautiful work and then still have an enormous amount of kind of rough work to be done and run the risk of dropping the neck. I've dropped a neck before, and it's sickening to look at a huge gash in a corner. You can get them out, but it's not something you want to have to do. So, but with this one being paint grade, I went ahead and just did all that machine work because I wanted to see what his tuners were going to look like, and this is the black nickel that is going to be so cool, and I won't be able to really hold it. Well, it's holding fairly well, but that'll be the black nickel. That's the tuner we're going with, the Grover, and will be sexy. So I'm going to set that over to the side. But nonetheless, and the traditional tuner would be this tuner right here, the Kluson, or the Gibson Deluxe, I think it might be called, something like that. Let's see if I can find the right one. Sorry, I had that upside down. Now, if you were installing this tuner, you'd want to be very careful about that corner right there. They are extremely close, even in the old ones. There's not a lot of space right there, but since I was going with this tuner right here, I didn't worry too much about that space, and I actually went ahead and did a really beautiful taper on that. See, that's pitched right there. Obviously, if you look at that flat right there, that's 90 degrees right there. It's not 90 degrees off of this point right here. See, it's pitched in, and that is the sign of a really beautiful guitar. 5/8 of an inch thick here, 9/16 of an inch thick out there. I may have been too close to the camera, but hopefully you can see the taper. See how it's thicker up here and just subtle. It says it's 1/16 of an inch taper. Really beautiful. This is pretty much finished. It's ready to be painted, and believe it or not, that is the finished guitar right down the middle there. Because I'm 17 millimeter at the first fret and 20 and 32nd or so. 20 and about a half. Sorry about that. 20.5 millimeter there, just on this lower, so that once the fretboard goes to top there, it ends up being like a late 50s, early 60s faster Gibson profile. Okay. And I'm not going to talk about that stuff at all because we got plenty of time to talk about that later on. But I just want you to see kind of the order of operations that you could take. Obviously, that was glued in. And I made a mistake. I showed you guys the real small little clamps. That's not how I do that. I had completely forgotten. Keep in mind that center mahogany strip was riding high. And then this one's a completely different thickness and different piece of material. The way I do that is I lay the straight edge atop it like that, but I hold it off, to give room for additional clamping up here for that piece. And when I clamp these, it doesn't require a lot of pressure. You want to know the truth? I actually just use the quick grip, and I make sure that's perfectly in the center of the neck. And what that does, there was no issue with the neck. But if anything, it helps assure that your truss rod gets buried down, as I've already covered in the last video. And this just guarantees that as that fillet gets epoxied in, at least it is epoxied in perfectly flat. Okay, and that is one thing that I failed to cover in the first video. I mean, in the last video, as when you cut this out right here, this neck is going to have a tendency to not bow or anything like that, but it just wants to relieve. It's going to want to relieve down just a little. And I'm exaggerating to make certain that you understand what I'm talking about. It's going to relieve down out here, but only about 1 millimeter. If it drops considerably, that's okay. Don't panic, because that was the reason you left this thick, so that now you can shave that top a little bit closer to flat. Wait about 24 hours to make certain that it doesn't possibly revert back. But I'll shoot really straight with you. I don't ever recall having to play catch up with Honduran mahogany. Once I cut it out of a board, if it's been acclimating my shop for 3 to 6 months, when I cut it out, it doesn't move. And it's quarter sawn. It's good stuff. We're not going to talk about that anymore, but we covered that in the last video. But as soon as you cut this area off the back, you need to immediately start monitoring what's going on. Now, if for some strange fluke it actually starts twisting, that's a completely different animal, and I would probably discard the neck. Because there's plenty of other uses for Honduran mahogany where you could, rip it down to like little strips or something for some sort of other type work. But don't build it. Don't try to build a neck if the wood starts twisting. Even if it reverts back, it's already kind of let me down or revealed to me that it might be a potential problem. And the only time I've ever run into that possible twisting is if I was working with an extremely highly figured maple. Otherwise, maple is typically really stable, but just be careful. And I hope this is not a digression. It's going to seem like a digression, but it's related to the neck. And I'm glad I have this sample on the table. I don't know of anybody that builds their necks in component form like this. This is an enormous amount of work where you actually pretty much finish the whole lower without the fretboard on it. Most guys, when they build a neck, they've got a S4S flat board like this. They go ahead and take that board and they run it down the table saw or the router table, cut the truss rod channel, then they glue the fretboard on there. Then they start doing all their machining. Well, the danger with that is it's obviously really fast and it's easy to do, but you will never know where that lower actually wanted to go if it was going to be problematic. And this rosewood or ebony, and obviously maple or whatever fretboard you might be putting on there, it might be the difference between whether that neck is right at that threshold of twisting, and now this ebony is having to keep the neck from twisting. Now you got a neck that is potentially going to give you a problem, and it's probably going to happen fairly quickly. And I tell you when it's going to happen. It's like, I'm sorry, I did that backwards. If you had your fretboard on there, it's probably going to give you a problem when you start doing all this radius work and relieving all that material off. So in a long-winded fashion, by building my lower like this and monitoring it, this has been in my shop, I bet you, for 5 months, just over there on the table. And keep it sealed. Don't just leave raw wood laying over there. But she is as perfectly flat today as it was the day I machined it. So what does that tell you right there? I would bet you this entire guitar, you're never going to have a problem with this neck. Okay? Never. So take the time to think on this level and build on this level. Again, as I covered in the last video, especially if you're charging, multi-thousands of dollars to build a guitar, you need to make certain that you don't get a call back 2 years from now from a client that spent money with you, and he or she is really upset or confused because they don't know if it was something they did or if it was poor luthier work, things like that. So okay, so keep an eye on it, monitor it. If it's problematic, then make the determination as to whether or not you want to work with it. I don't know if I showed. Yeah, I did. I did show that because if you're working with the historical one, you need to maybe leave a little bit more material up there. Get this off the table. And sometimes when I do these videos, I feel like, God, just shut up, move on to the next thing. And then I will watch the video and realize, oh man, that was really important information for someone who's never built a neck, or either someone who's been building a lot of necks the lazy way, and every 10th neck they build, they're getting callbacks for. Well, that might be the reason right there, and it might not even be. It probably is not your fault. It's just you happen to be the unlucky guy that ended up with a piece of mahogany and or maple that was prone to twisting, and that's what it is. So build them that way, and they probably will always be good necks. So after the headstock was finished, actually after that was glued in and epoxied in and then leveled, let me just lean forward. Oh shit! Hold on, let me pause. Okay, make sure it's rolling. Okay, so obviously after that was epoxied in, that's riding high about 1/4 of an inch or something like that. I've got this little router that I set up with this little leveling station here. Where's something flat? And you can, if you're not hitting, and that's just a dovetail bit, which is really sharp, and I think it's probably maybe 5/8 of an inch, so it's got a fairly wide bite. But if it's not hitting right there, it's not going to run the risk of plowing down into your neck material that you do not want to lose, but it will basically be a one-shot pass, and that thing will be surfaced and ready to go. That was a one-shot pass, and then all I had to do was come in. If you invest in anything from Stewart McDonald, get these blocks here. That's a 12-inch radius for doing fretboard work, but these are awesome for just coming in and doing a little bit of cleanup, and I don't want to sand on that too much because I've already got it perfectly flat. But by having this tool right here, you might have to take a small handsaw and cut off some of this, but don't try to cut all the way down. Okay, let's say you had that piece of maple sticking up right there. This is an old scraper. Lay that up against it, and then keep your thumb out of the way, obviously, but use your flush cut saw, and then cut that off somewhere in that area, and then obviously cut it off right there, and then just leave that high about 1/16 of an inch, and then make your one shot pass, stop, and then come back and make your, obviously make that pass right there. This should be in your carpenter's jig clamp or whatever, and then make that one pass right there. And then you might want to wiggle around a little bit, but we'll see with this base right here, it guarantees that I don't fall off. I used to have just a sled, like a little sled over here and a sled over here, but I almost lost a neck once because sure enough it fell off, and it was unbelievable how close I was to the edge where that dovetail bit, once it fell off the neck, it dove down into the neck and it put a pretty mean little gash in it. I couldn't believe how close it was, and I had spent probably 2 to 2.5 weeks building a beautiful neck only to almost lose it because of that idiocy right there. So I never did that again until I built that base right there. So, never seen that. I'm sure it's been done before. So let me pause again, get organized, and try to get myself in gear so we can get this neck finished. Okay, so the next thing you would do after you've got that leveled and you've been monitoring that surface, making certain it's staying nice and flat, and it has, then you would come up here and do one or two things. I would recommend probably just working this down by hand, but if you know you're going to build more than one, then obviously refine your template, and then you can go from there. And it's funny, you can see this template is actually one of the first. I did not use this template for this. This template was one of the first ones I used, and it was actually a little bit too thin per this design right here. I'm gonna spend about 10 seconds with this. This might look really nice on paper, but I actually built that headstock template and it was way too thin, way too chintzy. And when you put these large Clusson tuners up there, in other words, the designer, he screwed this up. He got these points way too close to the edge. He was close to probably a little more than a 16th of an inch, and I actually added a little bit more than that. But the long story short is he had it such that by the time you put these on here, they were sticking up like Mickey Mouse ears. It was ridiculous. So I did not want to talk about that, but in the event you saw that on that template, I do not use this. I only use this for rough out, and then you can machine it with a router if you're really good. But neither here nor there. And then that will, this is 3/8 of an inch thick also. It's a real super thick. So if you want a really good template, go over 1/4 of an inch. Okay, but there it is, ready to finish out. Next thing would be, let's put it this way. The last thing you should do is do the taper. Well, before you do the radius work, the last thing you want to do is do the taper, because all of this tenon work up here, you're able to do it on a table saw, simply because you started out with a real true 2 1/4 inch width, and then obviously the middle of that is 1 1/8, and then just work everything from the center from there on out. And in the event, and please read between the lines when I make this statement, but in the event your fretboard, I don't think I've got that other fretboard. Yeah, I do. In the event you had to, shift your fretboard just a little that way or just a little that way, and I mean 1/2 millimeter. But you'd be shocked what a 1/2 millimeter will do over 25 1/2 inches in the event you made some mistakes down here and you're trying to make up for it, but you want to keep your neck on a straight center line. Okay, so all I'm saying is you can split some hairs by leaving some of this material up here. Don't go up here if you're going to if you're going to build a 1 5/8 inch nut guitar, and this one's not. This one's 1 11/16 of an inch width. But don't go ahead and taper that directly to your finished profile. All that needs to be done with blocks of sandpaper from like maple blocks, because that's where you're going to be wanting to blend the neck into the fretboard. Or like this one, go ahead and finish the neck very very close. This one is still 1 3/4 of an inch wide, so it'll get narrowed down a little bit once it gets the fretboard on it. But just know that leave yourself some room to do a little bit of shifting if you have to. You don't want to put your necks in on an angle or anything like that. I'm gonna stop because I don't want guys thinking that I build shoddy guitars, but you don't want to throw in the towel on a project if you found yourself trying to correct a few mistakes and stuff like that. There's ways around it. Okay, what else? Then the next thing would be simply define your tenon. It's 1 1/2, and then just set up your table saw, transfer, draw everything perfectly with a mechanical pencil, verify, and then just start making those cuts. Make this in, crank the table saw blade as tall as you can get it, within reason, and then make that in one pass, because if you started creeping up, the table saw has a tendency to start wobbling, and you'll end up with a sloppy cut. You get a better cut if you just make like one pass cut and know where to stop. when you're on your table saw. And the order of operations on this area right here would be up on the miter saw. I obviously mark 2 degrees, but I set my miter saw at 2 degrees, and I trust my miter saw. But I make certain that I make that first cut and only go deep enough that you can relieve the rest with your, like a little pull saw. You pulse, you'll do all the final relief by hand with a pull saw. But make that cut first. Flip it over. Change the miter saw. 2 degrees on the other side. Make that cut, and then flip it like this. And then if you have a compound miter saw, then make certain that you put it back on 0, and then set your miter saw on a 2-degree pitch this way, and come down and connect the two. Okay, and that will give you. You left this perfectly square. It's 2 1/4 width up here, and it's 2 1/4 width. 2 2 1/4 width here. So when you put that on your miter saw fence and you pull that miter saw down, you can just about bet yourself that that's going to be a perfectly square cut. And it's going to be a cut that you can trust even more so than these right here, because this one, I'm going to exaggerate, this one might be a little bit high or a little bit low. And once you're fitting it to the neck, to the body, that's no big deal, because you can come in and shave this off with a little bit of sandpaper or a file or something like that, fitting the neck. But you want that tenon to be perfectly square and true on the center line of that, because that's what guarantees the yaw, Y-A-W, of the neck, is it joins the body. And I've compared this to flying before. You got a roll, and you got pitch, and you have yaw. This is identical to flying an airplane. And the whole idea of the pitch is, just what it is. But with the yaw is probably one of the most important things, because that's what keeps your neck, true to the center line of the guitar body. And if you screwed up this tenon by making multiple passes and that being a sloppy cut, or either you miss the target, and then you come in here and you try to start filing and sanding and shaping and filing and shaping and sanding, and if you start fighting it, you need to admit the fact that you've screwed up, and probably go ahead and cut it out flat and glue a piece on there and start over. That'll be so much easier for you. And I hate to keep talking about worst case scenarios or hypothetical crap going wrong, but just try to keep your cool and do it right the first time. But if you don't get it right the first time, no one stop, flip off the lights, and come back and approach it the next day. But I didn't. I did this in like 10 minutes. It was ready to rock and roll. And speaking of that, I'm gonna pause, and I'm gonna go cut the rest of this loose, and we're gonna see if we can fit it to this guitar. So let me pause. Okay, so this was just done by hand. There's no sense in putting this back on the table saw and flipping it over and trying to cut that other side out. You run the risk of screwing something up. It probably would be okay, but I would only do that if you were building several guitars and you're real comfortable and you know what to predict. But odds are, if you stuck it up on the table saw and you pulled the trigger, it would probably jump and put a gouge in it. So all I did was just use this flush cut handsaw, and don't use the little chintzy saw, because it might not stay nice and straight, because you are cutting out a pretty good mass right there, and you want a saw that'll stay nice and straight. Okay, and I put that in my carpenter's vise, basically sticking up like that, and just kind of made certain that I held the blade flat. Okay, and then all I did was just come in and just do a little bit of a kiss relief there and a kiss relief there, a little bit of kiss relief there, and then catch it with and I still haven't, I'm going to do this on camera. I can see there's a little bit of fatness right there, but and don't go too crazy trying to chisel it all off. It'll just start tearing out. See, that's exactly what happened. That little piece tore out, and it's not that big of a deal, but it's better to just use your little rasp that you got at Woodcraft. about 35 years ago. It seems like that. I had these forever. That's the same blade I bought brand new. But you can use your pencil, scar it up a little bit. You don't want to get into any of that back there. And then just sit here and enjoy doing the woodwork and protect your headstock, you know. And just kind of start taking that down. Flip it over, monitor the pencil line, and it looks like the pencil line is gone, so that's good. Don't go too much, but don't worry if you do go a little too far, because that's what the epoxy will take care of. I can actually see that right there. There's some mask that I'll be taking off. Let's get some use out of that neck. You can see my pencil mark right there. It's not going to take much. Put your finger out there. That will guarantee that you're riding on that flat surface as you kind of blend this hump. Because see, when I cut it on the table saw, the blade being round obviously came down and it left all that material in right there and all that material in right there. You could have cut it on the table saw like this, but I like having all that mass on the surface and on the sides making contact with the table saw. It just guarantees that I don't do anything goofy or or some sort of kick when I'm cutting it. So, and I've still got to cut this material out in order to lower it down, but I have not assessed that yet. Don't use your multi-$100 Hunter mahogany as a base. One thing you can do right here is well, I'll go ahead and do it, but once you're fitting this, you'll want to ease the edge on that tenon. If this were the finished tenon, and obviously you'll be radiusing that, because you don't want a sharp 90-degree corner here trying to fit into a sharp 90-degree corner there, because it will just about guarantee, you'll be guaranteed it's going to give you a false reading that it's not fitting properly, and then you might go over there and screw up and start taking more material off than was needed, when all it really needed was you just needed to ease the edge right here, and back here once it's radius. And I've already done it on the body right here. See what I'm saying? I gotta be careful I don't screw this stuff up. Let me get this off. I'm trying to do too much. Right there, and right there. Make certain that you get that corner rounded over, because when you're trying to fit this neck into the body, you'd be surprised that little bit of a piece of material right there will give you a false reading. You'll think, oh man, I'm off. Something's not working. And all it was just that little corner right there, or either it was, as I just said, that corner there, or there. Okay. So let me, let's see if it fits. Wow, look at that. That's nice. And that was real time because I did not pause the camera. So that's what they look like as they're coming together. odds are, and what, see, now that you've drawn that straight line down the neck, simply lean back, look down the body at the pencil line you have on the body, and just ask yourself, is it in line? And this one's perfect. See if it'll show up in the camera. Excuse me. Okay, so I'm very happy with that, and that's what it takes to start fitting it all together. And you can start monitoring the wall here, and this is a good indicator as well. If you could do this, that'll be an indication that you're it's a little bit tighter up at the top. I flipped it over 180 degrees. I'm not going to force it because I don't want to break it. So that lets you know this actually this neck is intentionally a little bit tight because that way you'll be able to fit it. But once you are this one should be more loose. Yeah, that's about what it should feel like when you're getting ready to epoxy. That's a little bit too loose, but this is for a different body. But you'll have a good indicator of, you can see the pitch. There's my 2 degree on this neck, and you can start looking at the difference between the opening all the way around, and then where you really get a good indicator is whether you did a good job or not is if you can flip it upside down and nothing gets weird or caught. So if you can flip it 180 degrees and it still be really nice, and let me try to do this without dropping it. It's hard to get the lighting in there, but that's how the tenon should literally finish out with only able to like slide a piece of paper between it. Again, to practice getting really good at precision fitment, but don't leave this tenon a piece of paper too long, because then you won't be able to close up this gap out here. The least important point of the 7 points that we're fitting is the fitment of that right there. But there's no sense in it being 1/8 of an inch. You don't need an 1/8 inch gap back there. That shows that you didn't engineer your job. Okay, let me pause and get the table cleaned up, and we'll go from there. Okay, one thing I should have mentioned earlier is before you start trusting your table saw to do this really precision machine work, set your table saw up and obviously make certain that it's true, because anytime you make a cut, you got to make certain that you keep it S4S. And if you missed some of the earlier videos, S4S means that it is surfaced and or square all 4 sides. Okay, so, and we are. Stay nice and true. But if you ran into some sort of problem in the fitment on the front end when I just made that fitment, it might be that your table saw blade is kicked to one side. And I like the idea of set the fence up and always work from that one side. I don't like the idea of cutting this side with the fence here and then taking the fence off and putting it on the other side so that I can make that cut. Once I get that fence fixed, if it's not true and I make that first cut, and you should have done that with a sample board to make certain that you can take a little block of wood or a long block of wood, keep your fingers away from it. And if you can cut that block of wood and keep it true, then you know that once you cut your tenon on your guitar, whatever goes on over here, cutting on the left side of the blade, relieving down to the tenon, will also be repeated on the outside of the blade or the right side of the blade, because the fence is, now the fence is riding up against, well, the fence is always riding up against that side. It's just that you've either moved the fence over in order to make that cut right there, or you've moved it in fairly tight to cut off that last little 1/4 of an inch. Okay. I always say that ought to make perfect sense, but you'd be surprised when you're getting ready to do something like this. if you haven't done this before, you're gonna be so wound up overthinking everything that you'll forget to set up your table saw, or you might have made a bit of a bevel cut the night before, like a half a degree, and you forgot to set it back up straight up and down. And I can laugh because I've done that kind of before, and it's embarrassing. So make sure your tools are true. And now I'm ready to go over there on the table saw. And since I have not tapered this, I'm gonna be able to start working this down. Uh, and I wouldn't recommend trying to make this in one cut, but basically that's the area that I'm going to be taking off the bottom of that tin. These things are so big once they start coming together. That should be in the video right there. I'm going to be taking at least a good, probably 5/16 of an inch off the first cut. And if you wanted to be a geek about it, you could do this right here and see just how good you are. You know. And what I did was I just measured that distance right there and pull that out. I could come over here and make a mark. I'll go ahead and do it. I'm not saying I'm going to try to do it in one pass, but that should be what gets cut off. Okay. And if you want to, you can come out here on the end and let's see how I'll be cutting because my fence is on the left side, so I'll be cutting it off over here, and I will be. I'll try to keep it on camera. It's so hard doing this work on camera. It's so much easier, and it's actually so much more enjoyable when you're just building a guitar. But when you try to build it on camera, you're continually thinking about the guy that's never built a guitar before, the guy that has been building guitar for 30 years, and then you forget about what it is you're doing. So what I'll do is I will be going over there, and to make certain that you really don't screw up, I'll always put an X on the side that you need to cut, because even the best of us, we know that we need to relieve that, and that's another reason to not start moving the fence around. You'll end up cutting on the wrong side of the line and you took off too much material. Does it matter? Yeah, hell yeah, it matters. Would it ever be seen if you didn't do that? No, it would not, but it's another step. It's another step you'd have to do to correct the problem. So let's try to get it right the first time. I guess one way I could have done it was flip that in upside down. Like I said a little while ago. Let's see if that'll work. I'm doing a little bit of experimenting here. I need to loosen this up a little bit. Yeah, I can't really show it because the thing's damn big. But yeah, it is. That line is right there. Okay, so I'm wasting 15 minutes talking about just taking that material off there. Let me pause, go make that cut, and then we'll start fitting it. And probably won't do any of the radius work because it's getting pretty late. And I want to get this video uploaded because I want to really take my time to round, because I round that by hand on my oscillating sander when I'm fitting that. And I've got to cut this tenon off about probably 1/8 of an inch. And I don't want to do what I just said and end up screwing up and cutting on the wrong side of the line and having that effed up. So let me pause. I'll be right back. Okay, I made a kiss cut just to make certain. And then that lets you know that we've got our table saw set up exactly where we want it. I think it's safe to just go ahead and make that cut, and we'll see if I'm able to hit it the first time. So let me pause again, and we'll finish it up. Okay, so made that first pass, and that's what it left. That's a fairly small blade. I think it's like an 8 1/4 that I took off an old miter saw I had, and but it's an extremely precise blade. I was using my 10-inch blade, and I hit a nail in a old board that I was cutting out. I screwed it up. So I'd rather cut with a small blade and it be extremely precise than work with that chipped 10-inch blade. So all I got to do now, pause again, take my large hand saw and just cut that out. and make certain that I don't risk hitting those corners, even though it's paint grade. Always be extremely aware beyond measure where your blade is, because if you hit that corner, and I'm not laughing at you because I've done it before, if you hit that corner, it's game over, because you'd be surprised. That is pretty much the finished guitar right there. It's within a very small amount. And be real careful about chip out. Chip out like that will get you in major trouble, like if you were to lose that. And I'm glad I'm speaking about this. Uh, if you're working with Carina, make certain that before you make this cut right here, take your a thin jet glue and kind of saturate that area right there, so it'll kind of crystallize that area. And then I think on basically just do all four corners, so that once the blade comes out of the wood, it doesn't chip out, because you may be trying to achieve that as your finished guitar, or it may be all the material you've got. So just be thinking about, once your blade exits, it usually tears out. Like if you were cutting this right here, which obviously you're going to be risking tearing out back here, you're not going to be risking tearing out up here. Okay. And then once you flip this over, you're going to be cutting this way now. And if it's going to tear out, it's going to tear out back here. So if anything, just jet glue with the CA thin glue in these areas right here, and it'll just guarantee that you don't lose an incredibly important piece of the neck, because that's 2¼ inch thick right there, and it's just going to be maybe about uh, a 1/16 of an inch thinner all together, meaning 3/32 up here and 3/32 up here. If you get a chip out like that, you're going to be finding out just how good you are at doing faux fit work. Okay, let me pause, cut that off, and then we'll get closer to building a 58 Explorer replica. Okay, so I cut that out, and that'll give you an idea of what it typically leaves. That's pretty substantial right there, but I wasn't holding the blade real tight, so I'm just going to do this real time. Okay, how you could do this, how you could gauge this, go ahead and put your depth gauge, get your depth. That's your target depth, correct? I hope that's in the camera. All I'm doing is creating a line. When I was a kid, my dad used to always ask me, if you mark it more than once, which line are you going to follow? And he had a good point, but I shot back once and I told him, I said, the darkest one. So every time I do that, I think of Dad. I'm like, which one are you going to follow? Just mark it once. You don't need to mark it 5 times. All right. And you can, if you're invest in these, Woodcraft. I'm not kidding. I think I bought these probably 30 years ago. You got a round one. You got one that's radiused on the back here, and then it's flat on this side. This is my favorite one. And then you've got one that is a triangle. It's incredible. Like if you needed to take out that material in that corner. Okay. And I'm not kidding you, these are the original blades, and they just don't dull as long as you're just working wood. I did break the tip off of that one. It was a little bit longer. And then they also make one that is just flat, like a 1/4 inch flat all the way out square. That one I broke in half. But what did I do with it? I find it. It's probably in my other toolbox. I took the broken blade and I epoxied it atop a handle, and wherever it is, it's probably around here somewhere. But those were probably, I think they're like $10 to $15 each. But if you told me, you're only going to be allowed 2 or 3 tools to build a guitar, it would probably be one of these, and I could build a whole guitar. It would take forever, but nonetheless, what I'm about to do is show you just how. See if we can just put it up a little bit higher. How good they are. There's my pencil. Very rarely do I ever just do work on camera because it ends up taking so long. I'm actually turning that. This is the triangle. I'm actually turning and I'm riding off that real sharp edge right there. Because my theory is this: if you're going to remove material, I prefer to use a really aggressive tool and get the job done very quickly. If you sit there with a cheap tool or a file, and then you won't realize that you're screwing up and getting something off. So I'm taking that middle out right now. And again, all of this is, it's all buried. But get used to doing really high quality work because when it matters, you'll have a really good eye to hand coordination, muscle memory, all that jazz, and you'll be able to do a really good job. And I'll tell a short story here. I used to be in architectural millwork, and we used to sell incredibly high-end doors, and sometimes I would go out and install the doors, and I'm talking 10, 15, $20,000. I installed a $45,000 door unit once, and did every bit of it with chisels and screwdrivers and stuff like that, and everybody was blown away because I did everything by hand. But I explained to them, I said, if you get an early 1900s house where nothing is square, you've got to be able to, do all that stuff by hand and it still work. So the same thing applies to this. Don't get too dependent on the machinery to do your job. And therefore, once you do need to do something by hand, you'll be able to pull it off. I'm kind of pushing out. You don't want to go straight across because you'll definitely cut a gap right there. And it's critically important that you get that hump out because if not, it'll screw up the roll. It'll cause the neck to roll up, and you won't even see it, and it might not even be measurable. And the worst thing that you could have happen is it roll up like this because that's the thicker strings that need more clearance for the vibration. If you were going to roll the neck, and some jazz guitar players do, they roll the neck down just a little. I don't mean not even visible, but they would roll the neck, down just a little bit on the lowy side. But don't get back into this area back here because all this is machined nice and true. If anything, it'd be better to have a little bit of a low spot right here and the epoxy fill that in, and then this flat surface guarantee that it marries up with that machined flat surface, and you've got a really beautiful joint. Perfect. It's a little bit high right there, but it's probably just that. Well, let's see. It's funny with the Bell's palsy, the right side of my lip is still loose. In other words, I couldn't play a trumpet right now, okay? So, oh, I can actually see that. That's actually still got a little bit of mass in there. Let me just finish it. So when I try to blow something, it's funny. It doesn't work like you think it would. and I'm as far back in the pocket as I can get because I haven't radiused it yet, and I still have to cut that tenon off a little bit. But the fact that you can sit there and just suspend it, that's the sign of, I don't like to make that statement like master level woodwork. I think that's BS, but it's the sign of doing really, really exceptional work, and that's consistent. So it lets you know that the tenon, which is on the 2-degree pitch, is bottoming out in the platform of the bottom of the body and still holding a real true joinery. And I do like showing this type of stuff because it lets people know that I know what I'm doing. And if anything, if you don't know what you're doing, let a video like this motivate you to do extremely high, really precision work. And that's perfect. So I'm going to end the video right there because if I start doing this, it'll end up being way too much information. But the next time you see it, this will probably be not only tapered, but it'll be perfectly fit and finished and fit into the body. Not glued in yet, but then I will have already done all of the radius work on the back of the neck and fit it to the body. Here's another good indicator. Let's see just how good of a job we did marrying the body, which was built with one template, to the neck, which is built to another. So I'm bumping that a little bit, so that lets me know. Oh, look at that. It's actually cantilever. It's sliding right on top of that. So when I sand and blend this body to this mahogany right here, it's just going to be minimal. Now that's rare. Don't let that bother you if you miss that by a 1/16 of an inch. That's just building a guitar, blending the neck heel to the body. I hope that's in the camera. I'm doing the best I can. So should make sense. Let's see how close we got back here. Better to have too much than not enough, because what will happen is right now this is pitching down. This plane right here is pitching down this way 2 degrees. It'll get machined with the flatness of this body. Therefore, when everything is painted, it'll be flush. But the cool thing about it, when you join 2 lines like that, it's kind of cool to turn it in the light and see where the joinery went together. And we'll be able to with this one. So I appreciate you guys dropping by. I'll end the video right there after I get the table under control. And can't remember who made the statement. I think the guy was a Marine, but he was talking about his drill sergeant made a statement, don't get killed eating a candy bar. In other words, don't do all this incredible preparation and brag about everything you did only to let that thing float and then go upstairs to get a cup of coffee and come back and find it laying on the floor, dented. So that was pretty darn snug. That's probably one of the best fitments I've ever done. So I'll stop talking and I will see you guys in the next video.